It's election night. That's the moment where he realized, oh my gosh, this is really about to happen.
President Trump is a star. He's an icon.
He hates for anyone to get more shine than him.
First, Trump was maybe a little uncertain, but I think he rediscovered that his inner voice was the right voice.
He called me a liar, and I said I won't be bullied anymore.
From reality TV star to leader of the free world, the inside story of the last 4 years, The Trump Show, starts Thursday the 15th of October on BBC Two and iPlayer.
Good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Louise Minchin and Dan Walker.
Our headlines for you today. President Trump is released from hospital and urges Americans not to be afraid of COVID.
And I learned so much about coronavirus. And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it.
Wind farms will generate enough energy to power every home in Britain within 10 years. That's the ambitious target to be set out by the Prime Minister today.
Families torn apart by COVID. We look at the plight of care home residents who haven't seen their loved ones in months.
Feels like you're bereft, that you're going through a bereavement, but without the person actually dying.
Good morning. Why from today you may well be working for longer. The qualifying age for claiming a state pension has gone up to age 66. What does that mean for the pockets of workers and for the public purse?
Good morning. Manchester United are the big movers on transfer deadline day. Edinson Cavani is the headline act as they call in the reinforcements.
Good morning. Today we're looking at a day of bright spells, some sunshine and a lot of showers. Some of those will merge to give longer spells of rain and the wind strengthening, particularly so across southwest England. I'll have all the details in about 10 minutes.
Good morning. It's a Tuesday, the 6th of October. President Donald Trump is back at the White House after leaving the hospital where he was being treated for coronavirus.
Mr. Trump tweeted that he felt really good, even though he'll continue taking steroid medication, and urged Americans not to be afraid of the virus. He's also been criticised for removing his mask while posing for photos. Lebo DeSecco has more.
A made-for-TV homecoming for President Trump after 3 days in hospital. The message, Trump has triumphed, as he greeted the waiting press. Shortly afterwards, he posted this video on Twitter.
I learned so much about coronavirus. And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment, we have the best medicines, all developed recently. And you're going to beat it. I didn't feel so good. And 2 days ago, I could have left 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I felt great, like better than I have in a long time. I said just recently, better than 20 years ago. I stood out front, I led. Nobody that's a leader would not do what I did. And I know there's a risk, there's a danger, but that's okay.
The White House says they're taking every precaution to keep the president and his staff safe. They're limiting access to him and say appropriate PPE will be worn when staff are near him. And unlike ordinary Americans, he'll have round-the-clock medical care.
Though he may not entirely be out of the woods yet, the team and I agree that all our evaluations, and most importantly, his clinical status, support the president's safe return home, where he'll be surrounded by world-class medical care.
For days, his supporters gathered outside the hospital, and for many of them, the president's illness could not have been avoided. But the number of top Republicans who've tested positive since attending the same Rose Garden event just keeps growing.
Donald Trump certainly knows how to make an entrance and an exit, and he'll be keen to get back onto the campaign trail. But there are still many unanswered questions about the status of his health and the more than a dozen members of his close circle that have been diagnosed with COVID-19. Lebo DeSecco, BBC News, Washington.
Oh, let's get some more now from our North America correspondent, Peter Bowes, who joins us live from Los Angeles. Peter, thanks for coming on the programme. So give us an idea of how the president's return has been received.
Well, good morning, Dan. It's been received with, frankly, a lot of anger when he goes home and tells Americans not to let the virus dominate them, not to be afraid of it. The reaction from a lot of people has been, well, try telling that to the families of the 210,000 Americans who've died because of COVID-19. It was an extraordinary choreographed return to the White House from the moment that he stepped out of the hospital. It was prime time, evening news time in America, to the moment that he got back to the White House, walking up to the balcony, immediately taking off his mask and posing for not only pictures, but it seemed as if he was making some sort of video, perhaps a campaign video that we'll see in the coming days. And he's been strongly criticised for taking off his mask, with Joe Biden for the Democrats, his opponent, of course, in the presidential race, saying, "What is this macho thing? What's the deal?" He says it would be presidential, it would be patriotic to wear a mask, this is Joe Biden, and to set an example. President Trump, by all accounts, of course, is still infectious. It's only 4 days since he was told that he was positive for coronavirus. Now, everyone will be celebrating that he's well and he's got home and is hopefully going to recover. But the fact that he then walked into the White House, still with his mask off, again, has just raised so many questions about his attitude towards safeguarding the people around him and the broader message to the American people, having gone through this process of dealing with the disease and still seemingly adopting his old attitudes towards prevention and to wearing a mask.
Peter, thank you very much for that assessment, and that is something we'll be looking at throughout the course of the programme this morning. Do let us know what you think about that.
The government wants to produce enough electricity from wind farms to power every home in the UK within a decade.
The Prime Minister will make the pledge today in his speech to the Conservative Party conference, which is being held, of course, virtually.
Let's speak to our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake. Morning to you. This is an ambitious plan, isn't it? Morning.
Morning, Louise. Yes, it certainly is a big promise and, as you say, an ambitious aim from the Prime Minister, setting out what he believes will be plans to make the UK a world leader in clean energy in the next 10 years, something he'll describe as a green industrial revolution, creating hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of jobs in the UK, although the immediate plans the government will create something like 2,000 jobs in the construction sector. £160 million worth of investment going into places like Teesside and Humber, and also sites in Scotland and Wales as well. And Boris Johnson will say that coronavirus should be a catalyst for these plans. And in setting this out, he may well go some way to satisfying Conservative MPs who want him to look past the pandemic, remind people what the Conservative government is all about. But as the Prime Minister will be speaking, the reminders of the coronavirus crisis will be all too clear for him to see. The government's approach to test and trace under increased scrutiny, and MPs pretty much at the same time as he's making his speech, trying to come up with ways to block the government's plans in terms of restrictions put in place to slow the spread of the virus. So Boris Johnson might well be looking to the future today, but there are reminders of the challenges he faces in the present everywhere.
Jonathan, thank you very much.
You've got two things to remember when you take on the wall. Green is good. You're making money. Red is bad. You're losing it. Is it right or is it wrong? Shall we liven this gaff up a little bit? Wall, show us some love. Drop 'em. The wall.
Continues Saturday at 9:20 on BBC One and iPlayer.
Hello, good morning. You're watching Breakfast this morning with Louise and Dan.
A technical glitch which led to nearly 16,000 COVID-19 cases go unreported in England should never have happened. That's according to the Health Secretary.
So, has the problem been fixed? Let's pick up on this and a number of other issues this morning by speaking live to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who joins us on Breakfast. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for spending a bit of time with us today. Can we start with the test and trace system? There, conservative estimates say that some 34,000 people could be completely unaware they've been exposed to the coronavirus because of what we saw over the weekend. It seems that every day we speak to a minister on this programme and we're asking questions about why the test and trace system isn't up to scratch. What's happened?
Well, I'd echo what the Health Secretary said yesterday. This should never have happened. And the primacy now is making sure we're working as hard as we can to fix it. So in that vein, what has happened over the weekend, several thousand man-hours were deployed in finding and contacting all those who we hadn't contacted over the previous couple of days. As of 9 a.m. yesterday, over half of them had been contacted for a second time. I haven't got an update on that figure, but obviously progress would have been made. And I'd say probably a couple of other things that are worth bearing in mind. The Chief Medical Officer and the JBC, the Joint Biosecurity Centre, who run this operation, have also confirmed that the numbers don't change their analysis of the progress of the virus and the measures that were taken last week. So that's important. And then lastly, in terms of everyone who had a test that tested positive, they were contacted as normal, and in particular, any test transmission at schools, hospitals and care homes would not have been affected by this, because those are dealt with in a slightly different way given the importance of those settings. So I think that...
Forgive me for interrupting you. You know how much scrutiny you are under with this system. You know that there are so many important issues around reliability. You were warned, we hear, about this system not being up to scratch. How can this happen?
Well, as I said, it should not have happened, and an investigation has been launched, as the Health Secretary said yesterday. It's worth taking a step back and seeing we have made a lot of progress in developing this test and trace system over the past few months. If you think back to where we were at the beginning of this crisis, we were doing just 10,000 tests a day. That, as of, I think, yesterday or the day before, we did 250,000 with capacity for 300,000. That itself is up 40 or 50% since the summer and is ramping up to 500,000 by the end of October. We're already currently, if not the leading, one of the leading nations for testing anywhere in Europe in terms of the number of tests we do. So that has made, we have made substantial progress. We've obviously invested close to £12 billion in this system, and it is making a real difference. But you're right, we can always do better, and we will keep at it.
You have said, though, haven't you? You said opening up the economy, which you talk about a lot, relies on test and trace. I think the quote was doing its job. Do you think it can do its job?
I think it already is doing its job, Dan. As I said, we're now testing 250,000 people a day. Hundreds of thousands of people are isolating a result of that process, which is good because that helps us to suppress the spread of the virus. We also have testing which allows us to do population survey testing every week to give a really accurate picture of what's happening with the virus through the Office of National Statistics. And the extra testing capability allows us to be more targeted in our interventions and localized in our approach. You know, those are all tools that we didn't have at the beginning of this crisis that we do now. And that's why I think the investment is paying dividends, but we will keep working at it to make this system better and better every week and every month. That's to all our benefit. It allows us to suppress the spread of the virus and to allow as much economic activity to happen and protect as many jobs as possible.
Of course, tied in with this is this a policy of local lockdowns. We've just spoken to the Mayor of Greater Manchester. If you look at the figures for Manchester, July the 31st, when local restrictions were introduced, it was 20.5 per 100,000 infection rate. The week to the 2nd of October, 529.5 per 100,000. This is an area at Manchester that's been under local lockdown for weeks. Are they working?
Well, I think that they are working, and it's going to be different in every particular area, the source of transmission, which we don't always have a perfect view on. This is a complicated virus. It's complicated to know exactly what it is. Well, we've had situations in the past, for example, in the Midlands, where I think the scientists were able to identify that they thought it was household transmission, house-to-house contact in homes that was causing the spread, rather than what I think we thought right at the beginning, which was it may have something to do with particular workplaces. So as we learn more, we can adapt our interventions. And if you look at places like Leicester or Luton, indeed, who have had these restrictions and have them lifted, that shows that there can be light at the end of the tunnel. But this is the right approach. The alternative is that we have blanket national interventions, and that I think that clearly wouldn't be appropriate, and we should try and avoid that if we can, given that there are areas of the country which aren't seeing this level of either growth or absolute level of transmission, and therefore in those areas we can afford to take a slightly different approach. I think that is a better way to go, this more targeted, localised approach.
OK, I'd like to talk to you this morning about paying for the pandemic. You know, you're the man with his hands on the purse strings. You pledged yesterday, many of our viewers will have seen you talking about balancing the books, and you talked about balancing the books in the medium term. Can you explain that to our viewers this morning? What does that mean? Does that mean measures not in this term of Parliament? What are we looking at?
Yeah. So, what does that mean is this year, I'd say to viewers, this year we're obviously having to borrow an enormous amount of money to provide support to the economy at a time of crisis. That's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to try and protect as many jobs as possible at this difficult time, because ultimately that will help us recover quicker when we emerge on the other side. Now, in terms of the medium term and what I was talking about yesterday, I was making the point that obviously this can't carry on forever. This level of borrowing, which will be record levels pretty much this year, it is not sustainable in the long run. We need to get through this, have our economy start to recover, and as we then take stock of the situation, we want to restore our public finances to a position of sustainability, which is where we're not borrowing ever larger sums every year and debt is going up and up and up. I think that in the long term and in the medium term is not a sensible thing for the country. So we'll have to look at that when we get through. Right now, that's not the focus. Right now, the focus is on protecting as many jobs as possible. That's why the Prime Minister today is going to be talking about the offshore wind industry and creating tens of thousands of new jobs in that industry. That's why we launched the Kickstart scheme to create job placements for young people at risk of long-term unemployment. That's what our priority should be right now, and that's what we're focused on.
And on those jobs, and when we said that you would be on this morning, we've had so many people contact this programme saying that they feel excluded from the measures. And, the self-employed, small businesses, many people in the travel industry getting in contact with us this morning as well. You say the priority is jobs. There are many people watching this morning who feel that fear of poverty, who are worried about their mental health because of what's happened in the last few months. What do you say to them this morning?
Well, I think there's many people, Dan, who may not just fear that that's going to happen. There's many people for whom that's already happened. 750,000 people have already lost their jobs as a result of what has happened to our economy during the last few months, and sadly many more will. You talked about people not being helped, small businesses or self-employed. Between 2.5 and 3 million people who are self-employed have received support through our self-employed income scheme, which is one of the most comprehensive and generous in the world. You talked about small businesses. Not only have they benefited from the furlough scheme, 1 million small businesses have benefited from our bounce back loan program. They've got that bounce back loan up to £50,000 very quickly to help tide them through. They probably are not paying any business rates this year if they're in the retail, hospitality and leisure space with cancelled business rates, and indeed they would have received £10,000 or £25,000 in cash grants. Almost 1 million businesses received those.
Chancellor, you mentioned all that money, and that's an awful lot of money. And the question I wanted to ask you about how do we pay for that? Because you said you'd look at it and jobs are your priority, but sometime that will have to fall, and that's surely going to come down to tax rises, isn't it?
Well, I can't comment on future tax policy, Dan, so you'll forgive me for that. But I think what people should take away is right now the priority is focused on protecting as many jobs as possible. It's not going to be possible to save every single job. So at the same time, I want to provide fresh opportunity for people. And that's why you heard the Prime Minister talk about lifetime skills guarantee the other week, new qualifications for people at any stage in their career. We've improved the ability of companies to take on new apprentices at any stage in someone's career. All of that will help provide that fresh opportunity. But yes, once we get through this, I think people should rightly expect us to make sure we have a strong set of public finances. The reason that's important is because when these difficult times come along, when the next crisis comes along that needs the government to respond in the way that we have, you want to enter that period knowing that your public finances are in a strong position. And it's because of some of the difficult decisions and hard work that's been done over the past 10 years that I was able to act with the pace and scale that I did during this crisis in order to make a difference. So that's why this is important.
It sounds like you are talking about tax rises without saying you're talking about tax rises.
I say the same thing whenever I'm asked, Dan, so I wouldn't read anything more into it than I can't comment on future tax policy outside of fiscal events. That's the same answer I give to everyone on any question about tax. So I don't think you can read anything into that either way.
Can I ask you about the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which I think has cost the government to date about £522 million. There have been some suggestions that has contributed to a rise in the virus. What is your response to that? Was it a mistake?
No, I don't think it was, actually. We've just been spending all this time talking about jobs, and you highlighted the calls from or the emails and messages from your viewers talking about being fearful of losing their jobs.
But it's that balance, isn't it, Chancellor, between protecting jobs and also protecting people's health?
The hospitality industry employs over 2 million people. they're disproportionately young, women, people from ethnic minorities, and people who are lower paid. So as a matter of social justice, I think actually trying to protect and support those jobs is very important. Now, we had a period of time where no one was going out, and I think it's important for behaviour for us to relearn what that feels like in order to try and protect those jobs. In terms of the scheme itself, it's worth bearing in mind that, yes, are we seeing an increase in cases today? We are, but that's very common with many other countries around the world. There is a global second spike, and indeed our scientists, you'll remember, talked about us following exactly the same curve as France and Spain, and a little bit different to Belgium. So to put that in context, what's happening here is essentially the same as what's happening in lots of other places. But then also at a more granular level, you look at a place where that scheme was very popular and very well used, for example, the Southwest, that part of the country is today seeing some of the lowest levels of coronavirus spread or transmission or growth. So that doesn't quite add up in that sense. But you're right, ultimately this is a balance. I think we want to strive for normalcy. We want our lives to be as normal as possible. We want the economy to be as normal as possible because that protects as many jobs as possible. But we have to do that whilst balancing the need to suppress the virus and ensure that children go to school and all these other things. It is a very difficult balance to get right.
Can I ask you about the curfew, Chancellor? Do you agree with the 10 o'clock curfew? Do you think that's working?
Yes, I think the curfew is something that we were told by our advisors could well make a difference to the spread of the transmission. We know social contact is how the virus spreads. There's lots of different ways that social contact happens, whether inside people's homes or indeed in other settings, such as in hospitality venues, and particularly exacerbated later in the evening. And in common with many other countries around the world, this is thought to be something that can help suppress the spread of the virus. We're not an outlier in having a curfew. Lots and lots of countries have done very similar things, some earlier, some later, but as a tool that we have at our disposal to try and suppress the spread of the virus, it's one that is advised across the board can make a difference. And what I'd say is it's better than having places closed.
We understand that in Cabinet there's healthy discussions about these things, about measures that you're putting in place, about things you're thinking about but maybe not doing at the moment. Is that the issue, the curfew? Is that the sort of one topic that has caused the most discomfort in Cabinet around that table? Discussions about whether that's the right thing to do or not?
No, I wouldn't obviously dream of commenting on private discussions, but I think you're right more generally, and I think people would be shocked otherwise if they thought we were a bunch of robots sitting around a table who all just agreed on absolutely everything. The whole point is we debate and discuss things in order to try and get to the right answer on behalf of the country, and then as a team we take that forward and try and make a difference. Now that's the decision we've reached on this, on the advice of the scientists who are advising us. We believe it will make a difference, and as I said, it's something that many other countries around the world are also doing. So I think that should give people some reassurance that we are not a massive outlier in this regard.
You currently sit in one seat around that Cabinet table. Do you ever think about sitting in the top seat at some stage, moving to number 10?
No, the job I have is difficult enough. We're very fortunate to have the Prime Minister leading us. I see that every day up close. It's an extremely difficult job. We talked about all the things that one has to balance in this situation. I don't envy him. I think he does an extraordinarily good job of providing that leadership, calm leadership at a time of crisis.
Mr. Sunak, you said yesterday that you had watched him do the job over the last few months and you'd seen the stresses. Has that put you off being Prime Minister one day?
Yeah, as I said, my job is difficult enough. We've just been talking a lot, rightly, about your viewers and others who are worried about their jobs. Now that's something that weighs very heavily on me. That's happening on my watch. That's my responsibility, the British economy, people's jobs and livelihoods. And unfortunately, at the moment, many people are losing their jobs and many more will. And I'm trying my best to provide new opportunities for those people, fresh hope, and try and protect as many of those jobs as I can. It's an unbelievably difficult situation, and I need to spend all my energy focused on that, and that's what I'm doing, and let the Prime Minister get on with what he's best at, which is leading this country through what is a very difficult time.
Chancellor, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.